What's going on, everybody? Let's see if I can get the chat up here. There we go. How's everybody doing? First time live streaming with the new microphone, so hopefully it works all right and you guys can hear me okay. And we'll talk through how this is all going to work once we get going here. Give a few minutes for everybody to appear in the live stream. Got some homemade caramel apple sangria with a little fireball in it that I'm enjoying tonight. Talos, I can tell you. Let me go back up and find that chat. That's actually a fantastic question. I prefer Patreon. I absolutely welcome and appreciate YouTube memberships. I prefer Patreon because YouTube takes 40% of everything. So if you do a super chat in this live stream tonight, YouTube takes 40% of it. If you do a membership on YouTube, they take 40% of it. On Patreon, the percent's more like 8%. So it's a lot less. So glad to see you all here. Apologies to our friends in Europe. I know this is awfully late for you. It's midnight in Central Europe time already. So, yeah. So we were joking in the chat earlier about how maybe for these early presidential elections, I should only allow white landowning American citizens to vote, because that would, of course, be realistic, but we're not going to do any of that. So, no, we're going to do all the elections from 1789 to 2024. We're going to do them all. So let me talk through real quick how this is going to work. Yeah, it's 11 p.m. in the UK, 12 a.m. It's midnight in Central Europe time. But this was my only night free this week and weekend because we're in the midst of a really busy time of schedule. But here's what we're going to do. So we are going to do, we're going to go through every election, presidential election. We'll go through them pretty quickly. We're not going to spend a lot of time, especially on the early ones, because there's not a whole lot to talk about with some of the early ones. I'll briefly just present who the candidates were, and who I'm going to allow you guys to vote for is anybody who received an electoral vote, or in the cases of some of the early elections where there were a bunch, we'll limit it to like the top 3 or 4. We'll talk real briefly about the candidates and about any specific issues in that election. And then I will put it up for a poll. Obviously, people can't separate their hindsight from things, but I'm going to ask you as much as possible to put yourself in the position of a person who would have been voting at that time, and decide based on the issues that matter to you, based on the circumstances that were going on, and not based on, oh, this person turned out to be a really bad president, so in hindsight, I'm voting for the other guy, because the other guy might have been worse in that scenario. So, and then I'll give you guys, as we're doing that, you guys use the chat to make your case for your candidate, right? So we'll kind of do it that way. So, so make your case, and then we'll kind of do the chat as we go along here. And yeah, Garfield Arthur 1880. I almost wore my shirt. I have a Garfield Arthur 1880 t-shirt, and I almost wore it for this live stream. But I also have a Hamilton 1800 one. But yeah, if you saw my video today, I'm pretty excited about Death by Lightning coming out. And I didn't mention in the video today that the reason it's called Death by Lightning is actually based on a quote from James Garfield when he was when it was brought to his attention that there may be people who want to do him harm. He said, I might as well try to avoid being struck by lightning as to avoid being assassinated. He just said, basically, if it happens, it happens. There's nothing I can do to stop it. And so that idea of death by lightning is based on that quote from Garfield. Let's go through a couple super chats, and then we'll hit on to the 1789 election. Like I said, going to do all the elections all the way up through the present one. I'm sure that'll be very even-handed, and no one will get worked up over that one at all. Hello from Northern Virginia. Weather's gorgeous here. It's gorgeous here too. It's finally fall here in Northeast Ohio. It's beautiful sunshine today, cool temperatures. It's like sweater weather right now. A little chilly at night. We had my son's senior night last night, his last ever home game. We won 6-0. It was great. A wonderful night for the 12 seniors on our team. Son started at a position he hasn't played all season, so that was kind of fun. He's been center back all season, and through the second half of last season, he was a center back. Tallest guy on the team, so they put him in defense. But they played him at right wing back yesterday, and that was a lot of fun. He got to go on attack a little bit, so he enjoyed that. Storm Chaser Gabe, hi, how you doing? Thank you for that. Terry, Mississippi, thank you, Shepard. Not sure when I'll be back in Vicksburg. I was hoping at some point I want to do a series of videos with my friend JD from the History Underground there, but he says he's waiting until my book's done, my book on the 20th Ohio, who fought there, before we go there. So I got to hurry up and get that book done so we can go. American Nerd, thank you for that. Ron Swanson is Chester Arthur. Yeah, and I think he fits perfectly. This is going to make everyone hate everyone. Well, I hope that's not the case. Enver, thank you so much in Bosnia. Just so you know, if you're ever in Sarajevo, you can buy a city tour ride in Franz Ferdinand's car replica. Really? That's really cool. I really want to get to Sarajevo. That's high on my list. I've seen the actual car, which is in Vienna. Oh, man, that's really cool, Enver. And I hope that you'll stop by and meet me when I do get down to that part of the world. Definitely high on my list for sure. All right, let's do this. Hell, there's JD. Speaking of which, quit playing around on these live streams and get to writing that book. I actually did a podcast interview yesterday that's going to be coming out probably in the next week or two, and we actually spent a lot of time talking about the book, and you'll get to hear some of what's going to be in the book. You'll get to see. He actually read a quote from my prologue for the book, which I gave him a copy of. And then I talked a little bit about some of the really interesting stories that are going to be included in the book. So, all right, let's go ahead and get to, how do I get rid of this banner? There we go. All right, let's get to the first election. Let me go ahead and pull it up here. So we're going to 270 to Win, which is a website that has little kind of summaries of the different elections. And it's got giant ads as well. Let's close this giant Subway ad here. Oh, it won't let me scroll this over, will it? So, okay, I guess we'll need to. Yeah, I guess that'll work. All right, so 1789's first presidential election. Obviously, not a lot to go on in this one. Technically, look at all these ads. This is kind of crazy. I need an ad blocker. Not a lot going on here. You didn't have popular votes going on. The way it worked at this time is each elector cast 2 votes for president. You couldn't vote for the same person twice, and you couldn't vote for somebody from your home state, or you couldn't vote for 2 people from the same state. Each elector selected Washington with 1 of his votes, effectively making him unanimous choice for president. By coming in second, John Adams was named vice president. That was how it worked back then. The runner-up became vice president. And so for 1789, 1792, 1796, and 1800, that's how it worked. The runner-up was vice president. They changed it with the 12th Amendment, which we'll talk about when we get there. So I'm going to put up the poll here, and we'll go from there. Let me see how I'm actually not sure how I do this from StreamYard. Goodness. I might have to have, is Professor What in here? Might have to have him do the poll, because I'm not entirely sure I can do it from StreamYard. I'm trying to look here and see. We want Washington, he says. Professor What, are you able to create a poll as a mod? If so, put up Washington and Adams for people to vote on. I don't know why I can't do it in StreamYard, or at least I haven't figured out how to do it in StreamYard. I'm looking to see if there's a way. Doesn't look like you can. Okay, I'm going to have to go directly into YouTube then and do it that way. So just give me 1 second, guys, and I will do that. Apparently, I'm still logged into my gaming channel on YouTube. So let me log into the proper channel, There we go. All right, so I'm going to go in, just an extra step that I'll have to do in order to do this. That's all. There we go. Mute that. Here we go. Here we go. All right, I can do it. So obviously, John Adams was not actually running, but he was still, he could have been voted for. So there you go. First vote is up. John Adams was the best dictator we ever had, he says. Yeah, so 1789, not really a lot as far as issues go. We don't have parties yet. Basically, Washington was understood by everybody that he was going to be the president. Issues of the day: we have ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Article 2 relates to the executive branch. So, I mean, brand new country basically under the Constitution at that point. Wow, there's 800 people. This is amazing. I am just blown away by that. So we'll go pretty fast through these. I don't think we need to stick on this one too long. I'll go ahead and end the poll right there because look at these ads just popping up all over the place. Clearly, George Washington is going to win that one, 92-8. John Adams, I agree 100% with those who are saying John Adams is one of those people whose career, the best part of his career was the part where he wasn't president. His presidency was the least favorable part of his career. Every other part was really good, but that one was, I think, always going to go that way. So there's not a lot to talk about there. Let's go ahead and do a couple more chats while we vote on 1792, which basically is the exact same thing. Let's go ahead and skip ahead to that one. I'm looking to see if there's an easier way to advance to the next one without having to go back first. Doesn't look like there is, so I'll have to go back. And then we'll go to 1792. They're going to get more interesting, I promise. Man, I really got to get some like ad blockers because this website has some crazy ads going on. So same thing, George Washington, John Adams. We add George Clinton of New York to the mix on this one. So let's go ahead and do that. Washington not as popular in his second term, or when he's running for his second term. George Clinton will eventually be Thomas Jefferson's second vice president. So there you go. We're going to vote on that one. And while we're doing that, I'll get caught up on Super Chats a little bit. Austin, new member. Thank you so much for that. Love the William Howard Taft profile picture there. Am I going to vote for all the Ohio candidates? I'm not voting. I'm just presenting the information and letting you guys do the vote. We're up to 900 people watching now. This is amazing. I'm obviously not covering these ones in too great a detail because there's not a lot to talk about. Though, as you see, when we get to 1792, now we have Federalists and Anti-Federalists. And basically what you have is Washington hated political parties. But he was basically a Federalist in terms of his policy, in terms of his view of government, even though he never would have identified himself as a Federalist because he hated the parties. Federalist is the party that's generally considered to have been founded by Alexander Hamilton, who had a tremendous amount of influence in Washington. But by this point, 1792, Hamilton's not in the cabinet anymore. He and Jefferson both leave the cabinet. They're not there for Washington's second term. But basically you have the pro-existing government, pro-administration, and anti-administration. And these anti-federalists are going to coalesce around Thomas Jefferson, and they're going to become, at least at first, what we know as the Democratic Republicans. They were often called Republican for short, though eventually they kind of morph into the modern Democratic Party by the time you get to Jackson. But we'll get to that point when we talk about it. So same deal, a little bit more split there. Washington still gets 88% of the vote. Mr. Coolidge, any thoughts on Mr. Beat's new video? Yeah, I watched it yesterday because he had it up for patrons. And yeah, I saw that I make an appearance near the beginning of that. So Clinton gets 7%. Adams comes in third. So under our vote that we just had, technically George Clinton is the vice president, which of course would make things very interesting. Okay, now there's a button that I can click on to go to the next election. So we're up to 1,000 people now. This is amazing. I love this so much. I appreciate you guys. Let's see who the top fans are. Oh, it looks like American Nerd 1776 is in first right now, tied with Leo Moeller and Shepherd 6. Yeah, they actually have like a leaderboard for people who are watching. All right, let's do a couple more super chats. Dalton says, I wonder why Prussians speak German. We were playing Hold Fast on Xbox the other night. I was playing with some friends through the Discord server. And somebody said they couldn't figure out why the Prussians were speaking with a German accent. He legit did not know that Prussians were German. So we're giving him a hard time about it, but I get it. Not everybody studies European history. So I'm going on a U.S. road trip summer 2026. Name one place I should go. Virginia. So much history in Virginia. I would go to Boston and the area around Boston, and then Virginia. Amazing history. Okay. So where are we at? We are on the first contested presidential election. This is 1796. This is Vice President John Adams versus former Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson for this election. And this is, you've got a Federalist against what is now the Democratic Republican, or as they say in Hamilton, the Southern mother blanking Democratic Republicans. Thomas Pinckney from South Carolina is also a Federalist, and he's running, but he's going to come in third. You have others sharing some, and then you have Aaron Burr, senator from New York at that time, coming in there. So we're going to put the top three again on this one, and then we'll do some more super chats while you guys vote and argue your case. Let's talk briefly though about the I'll put the poll up, and then I'll start talking about some of the issues in this election. Obviously, the main thing is a difference in the view of government, right? The Federalists believe in a stronger central government. It's why they wanted a constitution in the first place. Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans represent more of a states first, a states' rights kind of view, where it's a decentralized federal government. More power rests with the states rather than the federal government. So it was just a differing philosophy on government that has, existed all the way down to the present time. Want to make sure I get the spelling right on this. So we're going to go with the top three. Actually, you know what? We'll throw Burr in there for good measure, because those are the top four in terms of the votes that were cast in that one. Yeah, and very much this was are you pro-Britain or pro-France? Because by this time, there's war going on between Britain and France, and the U.S. is being potentially involved in all of that. The Federalists are seen as very pro-Britain. They're accused of being pro-monarchy. Jefferson is very much pro-France, getting involved in France and helping the French against the British, who he detests. So those are a lot of the things that are going on at this point in terms of foreign policy. A vote for Jefferson is a vote for France. Yes. We're going to let this one go a little bit longer. I'll do a couple of super chats because we're getting into more interesting elections now. What are your thoughts on Ken Burns' new docuseries in November? Do I prefer the drama style or older PowerPoint style? I think it makes sense that he's getting with the times, so to speak, and doing it more modern. I'm really interested. I've been hearing about it for a couple of years, ever since I first met Ken Burns a couple of years ago. And spoiler alert, I can't tell you too much about this yet, but I know I am going to be appearing on a show on Sirius XM, and the guests for that show are Ken Burns and myself. That's all I can say right now. But I'm pretty excited about that. I'm just in the early stages of getting all that worked out. But I was reached out to by someone that's been a fan of the channel for a while that hosts a show on Sirius. And he asked if I'd be interested in that. So I think we're going to talk about the Civil War mostly. But pretty excited about that. Zach, thank you so much. Member for 43 months, man. Really appreciate how long you've been around and a big supporter of the channel. All right, one more, and then we'll take a look at the results. I was in Amsterdam last week, Leo says. In case you don't get into the Anne Frank house, there's a free walking tour. Interesting. I didn't know that. Anne Frank house is amazing. You definitely have to get the tickets well in advance if you're going to do the Anne Frank house. You can't just show up that day and hope to tour it. The tickets are very hard to come by. So you need to get them in advance. So, all right, here we go. Let's take a look at this one and pull. Jefferson with 50%, Adams 39, Pinckney 6, Burr 5. So there's our first change in an election. 1796 goes to Jefferson. Adams remains vice president for a third term in this scenario. Someone says the system is rigged. Who voted for Burr? So I think this is one that's definitely colored by our view of what happened in Adams' term as president. Of course, he signs the Alien and Sedition Acts, which are very unpopular, and rightly so. But he did some good things too. He did keep us out of that war between Britain and France, kept us neutral. In that scenario, Clinton is VP. Yeah, I guess you're right. Or no, Clinton would be. Oh, that's right. Clinton was VP for the last election based on what we did. You're right. So Adams returns as vice president again. So, so there's an upset. Thomas Jefferson wins. We'll go ahead and advance to the next election, which is also between Jefferson and Adams, though. This is a really interesting one, of course, because of how it turns out, because of how close it is. So the Alien and Sedition Acts, Enrique, basically allowed the government to jail people for speaking out against the government, greatly restricted immigration and citizenship. It was seen as tyrannical, especially by Jeffersonians. And someone said, "Oh yeah, this is good. Can we get back to politics, please?" Because that's very much what was said in the song "The Election of 1800" in Hamilton. So a lot of Hamilton references going on here. Aussie, you're from Germany. Love the streams. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Deutschland, über alles in der Welt. Oh, very cool. It's Acrylic Games. Carter County, Kentucky loves you. Where are you in Carter County? That's amazing. That's where you've probably heard me talk about it. A lot of my family, my maternal side of my family comes from Carter County, from a place called Carter City, which is actually a little tiny village, and then Olive Hill in Carter County. So let's talk about the election of 1800, which ended up a tie in the Electoral College historically. Between Jefferson, and this is the first time that you technically have running mates, because they did run as tickets, so to speak. Like, people understood that the Democratic Republicans were putting forward Jefferson to be president and Burr to be vice president. They were putting forth Adams for president and Pinckney for vice president. But it didn't work out that way because there was a faithless elector somewhere. In other words, there was somebody who didn't vote the way they were expected to, and you ended up with Jefferson and Burr tying in the Electoral College. So Adams was not going to win regardless, and so you actually had some Federalists who actually stepped in, because it's the House of Representatives who votes in a situation where there's no winner. Nobody gets a majority of the Electoral College. You go to the House of Representatives. So we're going to start a new poll. This is 1800. And we're going to go in order. Once again, we have, in our timeline, sitting president Thomas Jefferson. We have vice president John Adams. we have Senator Burr and Charles Pickney. Let's go ahead and vote on that one. Same issues as before. We're not really dealing with a whole lot different this time around. Controversy over the electoral tie leads to passage of the 12th Amendment. We have over 1,000 people in here now. One elector in Rhode Island cast one of his votes for John Jay, one of the forgotten founding fathers. Mason says a vote for Adams is a vote for tyranny. Vote Jefferson. Of course, the issues of the day, the Alien Sedition Acts, the XYZ affair, which is an incident where there was a letter that was intercepted involving the French diplomatic corps that was seen as French interference in American politics and really inflamed people against the French, which of course hurt Thomas Jefferson, who was seen as very pro-French. This is also a time then when the dinner table compromise is going to go into effect, where the U.S. Capitol, which had started in New York City when Washington was first sworn in, was first moved to Philadelphia, and then eventually to the brand new Capitol being built in Washington, D.C. John Adams historically moves into the White House in 1800, just a few months before the end of his term. VTH will get arrested in Germany for saying Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. Really? I didn't know that. I'm actually referring to, in World War I, it was a song that was sung by German soldiers as they went into battle. But yeah, I can see how that would be something that would have been co-opted by the nationalists, by the fascists. It must be nice. It must be nice to have a Washington on your side, or in this case, to have Hamilton on your side. All right, so it looks like this one's going to be pretty one-sided from what I'm hearing. Jefferson with 70% of the vote. Adams 18%, Burr 8%, Pickney 4%. So just one change from the historical vote so far in all of this. So let's go ahead and do a few more super chats, and then we will get to the election of 1804. Not all Canadians are against 51. Liberate us. You want to be the 51st state, huh? Unlikely. Sorry. Is George Clinton related to Bill Clinton? No, probably not, because Bill Clinton's actually not related to any Clintons. Clinton was his stepfather. Bill Clinton's birth name, his birth father was actually Blythe, Blythe. 1800 is going to be fun, Avatar said. If you've heard of them, do you think Christian identity adherents are Christian, or are they so outside of bounds to be non-Christian? I'm actually not familiar with Christian identity, so unfortunately I can't speak to that. You could try using the Wikipedia page. It lets you navigate to the next election. Yeah, I thought about that. We could do that. Be less ads anyway, but we'll see how this goes for a little bit longer, and then we'll go. Democratic Republicans sounds like an oxymoron. Well, it didn't at the time. I mean, because obviously this is before you had the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as separate things. Rita, what's going on? My favorite cousin, just up the road from me. I have to message my kids to let them know that their DoorDash is on the way. I had to hurry up and eat a microwave meal. That's coming in 4 minutes. I'll tell them when it gets here. So, Rita, I hope you're doing well. One more, and then we'll get to the election of 1804. Here to pay my poll tax while it's still in place. Keep up the cool content. That's awesome. Potato sandwich. Appreciate that. Okay, here we go. 1,100 people in the stream. Amazing. 1804. Thomas Jefferson running for re-election. We've got a few more kind of boring elections here because there's not a lot of competition in some of these elections. So after the election of 1800, this is when they passed the 12th Amendment, which now actually makes it so that you have a running mate. And so you run as a ticket, a president and a vice presidential nominee attached to that president, so that they don't have that issue again that they had in 1800. And so Jefferson makes it clear that Burr is not going to be his vice president in 1804. So Burr actually runs for governor of New York, which is held by George Clinton, who's going to replace Burr as vice president in 1804. And it's actually the election. It's not the election of 1800. It's the governor's race in which Burr is running for governor of New York. That's the election that leads to the fight between Hamilton and Burr that results in their duel. It's over that election, not the 1800 election. So we've got, again, Charles Pinckney going to show up as the Federalist candidate. This is a landslide for Jefferson, 162 to 14. Ohio becomes a state in 1803, March 1st, 1803. We enter the Union as the 17th state. We are the first state that enters the Union having never had legal slavery in our territory. We entered as part of the Northwest Territories, in which slavery was always banned, and that's why a large part of Ohio, especially Northeast Ohio, was always very anti-slavery, very abolitionist in nature, and that's something I cover in my book that we were talking about. Yeah, I will take a look at Mr. Beats video at some point. So this, in our timeline, of course, would be a third term for Jefferson. The Louisiana Purchase is the big issue of the day. Thomas Jefferson's fascinating because he has very strong principles, but he, on more than one occasion, violates those principles as president. The Louisiana Purchase goes strongly against his principles as being kind of a anti-big government guy. He's against standing armies, but they establish West Point while he's president. Just fascinating things. So let's go ahead and get this one going. Jefferson is the immortal God Emperor. I like that. All right, here we go. 1804. And we're off. So Jefferson was full of contradictions. Yeah, he was absolutely a massive hypocrite, but he's certainly not unique in that, I would say. So while you guys are voting, let's get to some more super chats. How many people are we up to in the stream now? Still around 1,100. Very cool. Very cool. Come to Mainz, Rhineland-Pfalz when you visit. I'm actually was just starting to talk to my kids about where we're going to go next year. Speaking of my kids, they're asking about the food. And Germany's on the table for that. We may come there. We'll see. Adams the monarchist versus Jefferson the deist. Absolutely true. Jefferson was in fact a deist. He was somebody, it was a strong view at that time, deism, which was basically a belief in God, but a God who created the world, set the universe in motion, and then kind of stepped back and left things. So it's kind of a compromise between a belief in creationism, but a belief in kind of the Enlightenment era of man's kind of on his own and God's not actively intervening in the affairs of men, and supernatural. Like Jefferson had his own version of the Bible where he cut all the supernatural parts out, including the resurrection and things like that. Stolen and rigged again, someone said. If I could change one election, that would be easy for me. I would change Lincoln's running mate in 64. I think that would change the world for the better. All right, I think we're probably able to wrap this one up, right? Yeah, 737 votes. Jefferson with 72% wins a third term. But hey, good news for everyone. Jefferson is not going to be on the ballot in 1808, but his protege will be. So at this time, you have to understand that the modern view of power and influence is different at this time. Up until the recent times, the cabinet was very much the power behind the throne, so to speak. Like, I'm not saying they were more powerful than the president, but you had the president, and then you had like the Secretary of State was kind of seen by a lot of people to be the second most important person in the government, not the vice president, not the Speaker of the House, the Secretary of State. And that's why early on, many of the first presidents that we have, that's their kind of stepping stone to the presidency is Secretary of State. Thomas Jefferson was Secretary of State. James Madison was Secretary of State. James Monroe was Secretary of State. John Quincy Adams, Secretary of State. James Buchanan, Secretary of State. Very common thing at that time. So James Madison now, he's also a Federalist. Smallest president, 5'4", probably about 100 pounds. Sitting Vice President George Clinton, who had served under Jefferson, was also a candidate, but did not win that election. So you can see here again, Charles Pinckney for the Federalists. The Federalists really just have no one because they had John Adams. By this point, Alexander Hamilton is dead, and he had already kind of hurt his political career with the Reynolds affair. Continue the House of Thomas, Zarnicki says. So let's talk about issues before we put this up to a vote. So New York electors split their vote, 13 for Madison, 6 for Clinton. The Embargo Act is a big part of this. This is in the build up to the War of 1812, right? We're starting to have serious issues between the United States and powers like Great Britain, by this time the United Kingdom at this point. And so the Embargo Act is a big part of that, where there's trade wars going on and there's tariffs going on. And the Embargo Act does not go particularly well. James Madison plays for Tottenham Hotspur. Yes. So let me just read some of the details to you about the Embargo Act of 1807 a little bit. So it did the following. An embargo was laid on all ships and vessels under U.S. jurisdiction. They were prevented from obtaining clearance to undertake voyages to foreign ports or places. The president was allowed to make exceptions for ships under his immediate direction. Warships were exempted from the embargo provisions. A bond was required from merchant ships on a voyage between U.S. ports. So this was basically a response to this ongoing kind of naval Cold War that was happening between the United States and Britain at this point. So remember, this is in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars. So basically prohibited imports. So I'm sorry, I'm just kind of paying attention to the chat at the same time. It was a trade embargo on all foreign nations. So basically, it's almost an act of isolationism by Congress. And it was a way to try and combat what the U.S. government saw as an increasing encroachment on our rights by the Europeans. A one-sided Cold War. Yeah, pretty much. So, all right. So let's go ahead and pull this one up. So start a poll. We've got 1808 here. We've got James Madison, the father of the Constitution. Surprisingly enough, not a Federalist, though. And then you have Clinton again. Pinckney, once again, running. Once again, going to lose. Vote Pinckney for free trade. All right, let's do a couple more super chats while we're at it. It'll get more interesting, I think, when we get to some of the later elections. Joey, thank you so much. I love the Portuguese flag you've got going on there. Emma, Queen of Hell. Interesting name, but thank you so much for the super chat. Just in time for your birthday. Happy birthday, Emma. You got both Sherman's and Grant's memoirs, and now this live stream is going to be a great week. Also, a quick question. What's your favorite history era, American and world? American history, American Civil War. World history, probably World War I. That's why the two podcasts that I have going right now are Stories of the Civil War and Stories of the Great War. Green, thank you so much for that. Good idea for a live stream. I appreciate that. Have I considered doing anything special for Halloween content? Haunted history, cults. Actually, Tyler, it's interesting you mentioned that because I'm going to be doing some form of collaboration around Halloween with my ex-brother-in-law, Matt, who has a channel related to those kinds of things, those kinds of topics. It's actually here. I'll give you guys a link to the channel so you can look it up. It's called Planet 412. And he and I have talked a while about doing something at some point related to the stuff that he regularly covers on his channel. So we'll be doing something on there about that. I'm going to post the link in the chat right now. So he is married to my ex-wife's sister. So we'll do something over on Planet 412. Actually, he and I were just texting about that yesterday or the day before. So that'll be coming soon. I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet, but we're going to figure that out. So, Orange Soda politics. Do you think the results will lean more conservative, slightly liberal? If I had to guess, I would say slightly liberal, but I guess we're going to see. All right, let's go ahead and end this poll. James Madison with 69%. All of my generation will laugh at that. All the current generation would only laugh if it was 67%. So the House of Jefferson lives. But Pinckney gets a respectable 20% of the vote this time around. But all the people who hate the Democratic Republicans are once again disappointed. But this is how it felt, right? I mean, if you weren't a Democratic Republican, think about how this felt. You basically have one party rule in the United States from 1800 up through, at least in terms of the White House, up through the 1824 election, which goes to the House of Representatives, or else that one would have stayed with the same thing. I have not seen the new Historia Civilis video. All right, we're on to the election of 1812. This takes place right at the beginning of the War of 1812. And now you've got a different Clinton on the ballot. You're going to have DeWitt Clinton, the Federalist, and this one's a little closer, right? It's 128 to 89. You're going to have Clinton winning the Northeast, and you can see how at this point you've got some talk, not real serious talk, but you've got some talk about secession happening in the New England states, and you can see why that might be possible when you see that, you know, from Ohio and Pennsylvania south, it's pretty much Democratic Republican stronghold at this time. But New England, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, all going for the Federalist. So Louisiana becomes a state, and you see how they're kind of separated from everything else. But main access to Louisiana at that time is the port anyway. New York replaces Virginia with the most electoral votes, will hold the number one spot all the way until 1972. And of course, the big issue of the day is the War of 1812. It's the first time the United States is going to be in a significant war. I mean, you had the Barbary Pirates thing back during Jefferson's administration. Yeah, I mean, New England is very strong in favor of the Federalists at this point. And this is basically, are you in favor of war with Britain, or do you want negotiated peace, and do you want this to be settled, is kind of the big thing that's going on right now. So make your cases, everyone. Let's go ahead and do a poll. This is the 1812 election. It's going to get more interesting here real soon, I think, with some of the upcoming elections. You have Madison and DeWitt Clinton are your two main candidates in this one. I'll be curious to see if this one's at all close. Yeah, I thought maybe this one might be a little bit closer. Keep in mind, in hindsight, that the War of 1812, which was started by the United States, did not achieve anything of significance. 20,000 Americans die in a war that basically results in the status quo afterwards. So nothing's gained. Our capital gets burned by the British and Canadians. But it looks like Madison might hang on to this one. Keep the same administration during war. Yeah, that's kind of the argument that FDR is going to make later on. Hand count by Chris if it's too close. Madison was the dupe of Napoleon. I like that. All right. Let's do a couple more super chats real quick, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Incest openly taught in schools, children writhing on the pike in Halpert. It happened in France. It could happen in the U.S. if Jefferson is elected president. Wow. Wow. You know, that sounds harsh, but remember that, among other things, John Adams was called a hermaphrodite, a political hermaphrodite during this time. I mean, there's some pretty nasty stuff being said in elections. Jeremiah, thank you. Shout out from Gettysburg. Which election am I most excited to vote for? Clearly, it's the 1912 election. I don't think I could choose anything else in this case. Sahib, thank you so much for becoming a member. I appreciate that. Let's do one more, then we'll end the voting. Well, my Sirius XM interview, I have no idea. I couldn't tell you yet. I don't know enough about what's happening with that. I just had a brief conversation with the person who is in charge of it, and then they said Sirius would be reaching out to me. So that's all I can, unfortunately, tell you right now. I don't know more than that. Okay. Let's see where we are. Let's go end the voting. That one was a little closer, but in the end, it goes 60% for Madison, 40% for Clinton. American aggression equals not that bad, someone said. It's Jover for New England. All right, we're on to 1816. Now you're going to have James Monroe. So James Monroe, Revolutionary War veteran, nearly killed at the Battle of Trenton, that surprise attack on Christmas in 1776. His life was saved by a doctor who was able to clamp off the artery that was bleeding. He's actually in the image of Washington crossing the Delaware. He's painted into that painting. Former Secretary of State again. He's actually the sitting Secretary of State. The Monroe Doctrine is named for him, of course. So let's talk a little bit about that. The previous 4 years were dominated by the War of 1812. While it had not ended in victory, the peace was nonetheless satisfactory to the American people, and the Democratic Republicans received credit. So in hindsight, hey, we think the war went okay. We stood up to the British. It was a second American Revolution. We didn't win, but we didn't lose either. So, not losing is a win against the British. The Federalists had been discredited by their opposition to war and secessionist rhetoric from New England. President Madison has adopted some Federalist policies. That's what happens when you have long-term one-party rule, is that they start amalgamating some of those policies. The national bank, which is going to be a big issue in the coming elections, protective tariffs, which gives the Federalist very few issues to campaign on. So we're going to start entering the era of good feelings, right? Where you basically have, hey, everybody gets along because there's not really any opposition at this point. So it's going to be Monroe versus Rufus King. Rufus King's only going to win a handful of electoral votes: Delaware, Connecticut, Massachusetts. So it's, again, the aftermath of the War of 1812. The war's over now. So do you want to switch? You don't have to worry about changing parties midstream anymore, changing leaders midstream. Do you want a change in the war, in the election of 1816? Or do you want to stick with James Monroe? Unfortunate that the guy running for the Federalists has the name King, as they're already kind of accused of being monarchists. House of Jefferson. Kind of is a Democratic Republican monarchy at this point, isn't it? No kings. Yeah, Monroe's dominating this one. So to this point, we've only had one change, and that was Jefferson over Adams in 1796. I have a feeling it's going to be more frequent as we get further along. This time I'm parting ways with the Federalists, Damien says. So let's get a few more chats in here while people are voting. Finally able to watch a stream from work while I'm making money. Take my money for making me more knowledgeable. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. The Electoral College should have a runoff system. Interesting view there. Brandon, can't wait for the reaction after we overwhelmingly vote in Woodrow Wilson. Don't you even think about it. I'm ending the stream if you people vote for Woodrow Wilson. I just won't even continue. I'll be too angry to continue at that point. So let's see. Just making sure my kids got their food. They did. Okay. We're just gonna keep reelecting Jefferson till he's immortal God Emperor like Xerxes, huh? Interesting. No, thankfully we're not going to do that. But we're voting for. I mean, Jefferson's still alive at this point, right? He could still be running, I suppose, because he lived until 1826. All right, major victory for James Monroe. 78% of the vote goes to him. Now we're on to 1820. This is going to be Monroe's second term. This is the third and last presidential election in United States history in which a candidate effectively ran unopposed. Yeah, basically, you don't even have a Federalist at this point to run in this one. So you've got James Monroe versus John Quincy Adams, though Adams isn't really a serious candidate at this point, and you can see how that turned out. It's one electoral vote for John Quincy Adams. Came from New Hampshire, of all places. One elector selected Adams, so the result would not be unanimous. A lot of people thought, you know what, only George Washington deserves to be unanimous. Now slavery is becoming the dominant issue in our politics at this time. We got the Missouri Compromise. You're going to have all these other things going on. So we'll go ahead and vote, though it seems like it'd be interesting to see what happens here. So we're at 1820. We have what historically was a very one-sided election. You can vote for Monroe or John Quincy Adams, and they do pronounce it with a Z sound. Quincy is how they pronounce it up there. I feel like we're going to make this a little bit more close than it was historically. An unfaithful elector or a faithless elector. Yeah, I guess so. The Federalist hate is crazy. Betta Lame says, I'm from Quincy, can confirm. JQA. I like me some John Quincy Adams. Super smart guy, one of the most qualified people who was ever president. The man had a resume out the wazoo. I mean, incredible resume. He was anti-slavery. He was very much about infrastructure projects and making sure roads were built to help Americans spread out west, things like that. But we're going to talk more about that in the next election, where John Quincy Adams is more of a serious candidate, obviously. So yeah, this one's running a little closer than it may have. So 1,200 people in the chat now. That's awesome. But yeah, we have Monroe with 62%, John Quincy Adams 38%, in what was historically a unopposed election. So we're on to 1824, though. Here we go. This is the last election that went to the House of Representatives because no candidate received a majority of the electoral votes. And the way it works in the House of Representatives is this. Let me go off of here for just a second because I think this is worth talking about a little bit. So say right now we have 435 members of Congress. If the election went to the House of Representatives, there wouldn't be 435 votes. Each state would get one vote. So all of the Ohio members of Congress would come together and vote. And in their vote, obviously in this case, the majority of the Ohio delegation is Republican. They would vote for the Republican presidential candidate. That candidate would get one vote from the state of Ohio. California, all the representatives would vote, and there would be one vote cast from California. So there'd be 50 votes. Each delegation would vote. So Alaska's one member of Congress would have the same voting power as the entire California delegation in that scenario. And then the Senate would do the same in voting for the vice president, except they would each cast an individual vote. So that's what happens in this election because neither of them get a majority. You can see here. Let me pull it back up. Jackson gets the most votes. And don't really pay attention to the popular vote because not every state is voting popularly yet. Some of the electoral votes are decided by the state legislatures at this point. If there's a tie in the House, that's actually a really good question. I can't remember. I'd have to look up what happens in that case if there was a tie in the House. But I guess it would keep going until somebody changes their vote. But you can see how Crawford and Clay get enough votes. And here's where Henry Clay is going to start showing up in this. But Adams, even though he gets the second most electoral votes, he wins in the House. So let's talk real quick about the issues. You can see what the map looks like in this case. Really interesting. So issues of the day, the Monroe Doctrine, a big one. Only presidential election where the person receiving the most electoral votes did not win. Let's talk a little bit more about the 1824 election because there's more to it than just the Monroe Doctrine, right? So I think we are gonna go ahead and switch over to Wikipedia for this. So the Democratic Republican Party at this point has won 6 consecutive elections, and by 1824 is the only national political party. So yeah, John Quincy Adams is also a Democratic Republican at this point. All of these candidates are Democratic Republicans. They're all the same party at that point. The presidents of multiple viable candidates resulted in there being multiple nominations from the contending factions. Basically you have disagreements, and let's talk about who's running, right? So you've got Secretary of State John Quincy Adams of Massachusetts, the Secretary of the Treasury Crawford, Secretary of War John C. Calhoun, Andrew Jackson of Tennessee. He had been a governor and a congressman and a senator, I believe, as well. The Panic of 1819 kind of hurts the incumbency of the Democratic Republicans, but obviously there's no opposing party. The Missouri Compromise, the Missouri Crisis of 1820, where you have Missouri being admitted to the Union as a slave state, kind of comes into all of this. Let's talk briefly about the views of each of these people. So Calhoun had been clashing with Crawford since the spring of 1820. About their response to the Panic of 1819, Calhoun viewed the effort as designed to emasculate the Department of War and discredit. So Calhoun's kind of standing up for the military, standing up for the army, standing up for interventionism, and he's proposing reductions in the civil list. Calhoun is a staunch nationalist. He and Adams have similar policies at this point. Yes, we are going to allow you to vote for all 4 of them. The corrupt bargain, we'll talk about that. Let's be gay for Clay, someone says. But though claiming to prefer Adams, Calhoun feared Adams could not defeat Crawford in the South. And so Calhoun and Adams share a lot of policy views, but Calhoun believes that he can appeal to a wider audience than Adams can, but he effectively splits the vote over those people that have similar views. While the northern states wished to support a man of their own, many were reluctant to rally behind Adams. They felt Adams was too reserved and wasn't involved and active enough and he basically was perceived as indifferent and chill and depressed the kind feeling and fair exertion of his friends. Many potential supporters began searching for an alternative northern candidate. Rufus King was too old and unwilling. Vice President Daniel Tompkins had long since been dismissed as a viable successor. So basically what you end up having is, do you want a northerner who's a Democratic Republican? Or do you want a Southerner who's a Democratic Republican? Do you want somebody who's interventionist, somebody who wants to be active on the world stage, who wants to be more of a protectionist and an isolationist? So that's how you end up with these 4 candidates. So yes, Abe Lincoln would have supported Henry Clay in this election. So let's go ahead and vote on this one. Here we go. This will be a really interesting one, I think. Here we go. So we're on 1824. And we're just going to go in order based on how they finished historically. So we're going to have Jackson, John Quincy Adams, Crawford, and Clay. I'm actually really curious to see how this one comes out, because I have a guess on who I think's going to win, but I don't want to influence the vote. Early voting is coming back exactly the way I thought it would, actually, in this one. Bay State history. What are you doing not supporting your home state guy? Oh, this is actually closer than I thought it would be, though I'm not surprised that it's close between these two. It's Clay and Adams right now. Interesting. Very interesting. It's kind of how I expected it to go. Though I actually kind of thought Clay would win more outright than this. So we'll let this one go a little bit longer. We've got 700 votes so far. Gay for Clay. Clay equals Jimmy Carter, someone said. Interesting. All right, let's do a couple of super chats real quick, and then we'll. I want to give a lot of time for this vote, actually, because it's so close. All right, where are we at? Let's see. Vote. This was earlier. Vote for Jefferson. He sent the Navy to defeat the Barbary pirates. Yes, he did. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Matthew, thank you for this. Hope this makes up for all the times you complain about EA. So if you're not familiar, guys, we have a couple of dynasties in which a group of members of our community here through Discord, we play NCAA football. And Matt is North Carolina in the one dynasty, and you were Buffalo in the other one, but I know you just switched teams. I forget who you moved to from Buffalo. But yeah, he complains a lot about EA in there, so that's what he's talking about. And he says, "Go Canes, American Nerd." I think there are probably still deists out there. I think that's probably, while not a strong view, I think it definitely exists. Power Breaker Gaming, thank you so much for that. And was West Point created? It was a strictly military training. I think they always took. I think it was probably more military training than it is now, where it's more like college courses. But understand that even college courses at that time were different than they are now. So it was always like college. You always did things like mathematics and Latin and things like that. So I think it's always been college, but it more reflected college of that time than the modern day. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this vote up. This one's super close. John Quincy Adams wins historically. He narrowly defeats Henry Clay. Andrew Jackson finishes third in this one. Unfortunate for Henry Clay that that's the way it went. So now we move on to the election of 1828. This is a rematch between the two top finishers from 4 years earlier. Andrew Jackson's come back. He's going to run again against John Quincy Adams. This time he's going to win. And this is one of the most interesting time periods, because we're going to have something really fascinating happen in this election. Let me go back for a minute, because if you noticed in the previous election in 1824, notice something that John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson have in common. Look at their running mates. They both had the same running mate. John C. Calhoun was going to be vice president no matter which one of them won. And then you go to 1828, and what you have happen here is that the sitting vice president is on the ticket with the guy running against the sitting president. So imagine for a second if we had a scenario where it had been Joe Biden versus, or let's go back to the 2020 election, right? What if Mike Pence had been Joe Biden's running mate in 2020 against Donald Trump? That's what you had happen in this election. It was pretty crazy. I mean, but this shows you the nature of the politics at the time. There wasn't really a viable, strong alternative to the Democratic Republicans, which are now in the 1828 election rebranded the Democrats, right? They're now the Jacksonian Democratic Party. This is the birth of the modern Democratic Party. And you have John Quincy Adams associated with the National Republicans, the anti-Masonic Party. And this is really kind of, you're going to see the Whigs, you're going to see the Know Nothings, you're going to see a lot of other parties kind of come and go until the 1850s when the Republican Party emerges as the strong second party in American politics. So this vote is really a two-person race, right? We've got our sitting president, John Quincy Adams, going up against the guy he narrowly defeated in the House of Representatives 4 years earlier, Andrew Jackson. And many of the same issues in this election. Let's go back and talk a little bit about what was going on at this time. So tariffs, big issue of the day are tariffs. There's a lot of mudslinging in this election. It's a very ugly election. A lot of personal insults directed particularly at Jackson because of his marriage to his wife, Rachel, who was called a whore and all kinds of horrible things because there were allegations, probably true, that she was still married to her first husband when she married Andrew Jackson. And she ends up dying before Jackson takes office. And he always believed that those insults had killed her and never forgave the people who had done it. So Jackson's going to be the anti-tariff candidate. John Quincy Adams is going to be kind of the pro-tariff candidate in this case. Jacked with Jackson. No tariffs, no prosperity. Vote JQA. Adams all the way. A lot of people arguing that the election is rigged. The chat is really split, but the election, I think this is an issue here where people are very much viewing Andrew Jackson through the lens of modern history, obviously based on some of the negative qualities of Andrew Jackson. You have John Quincy Adams, who is the guy who's going to go on to return to the House of Representatives as a congressman, which is unheard of for a former president to do that. He's going to be the lawyer for the Amistad case, where he's going to defend the men who overtook that slave ship. So I think he's very, very much viewed positively versus Jackson in terms of character in the modern time. So this is when we have our first real shift in the party system, right? We're going to the modern Democratic Party, the Jacksonian Democrats at this point. They're going to be very anti-tariff, anti-national bank, very pro-states' rights. You're going to have the nullification crisis that comes about during this era in history, where states tried to cancel out the federal government's policies. My audio is cutting out. It might be because I was moving the microphone. I wonder if I did something when I moved it. So we're going to go ahead and end this poll because I think we can stop the count on this one. John Quincy Adams wins with 63% of the vote. So there is another change in history versus what happened historically. Now, for a third time, we are going to have Andrew Jackson on the ballot running for a second term as president. And this time you're going to have Andrew Jackson running for the Democrats, Henry Clay running for the National Republicans. Again, not to be confused with the modern Republican Party. You're going to have John Floyd from Virginia running as a nullifier who gets 11 electoral votes. And then William Wirt is going to be representing the anti-Masonic party. So this is very strongly, though, still between Jackson and his vice presidential candidate, Martin Van Buren, this time. And Henry Clay is kind of the strongest alternative. 54-37 is the popular vote in this case, though Jackson carries a vast majority of the electoral votes. Let's talk a little bit about what else is going on at this time in history. You've got the Indian Removal Act, obviously, which is something that people are going to use against Jackson and say, look at this horrible thing that he's doing, Trail of Tears, sending all of the Native Americans, even ones that had kind of westernized, are being sent being sent west of the Mississippi. The national bank is a big fight at this time. Should there be a national bank? A bank, the Bank of the United States that holds the U.S. debt, who is very much kind of a central monetizing agent for the federal government. So those are the things that are going on. The nullification crisis in South Carolina, which is a precursor to secession, which is going to come a couple of decades later, where states are saying we're not going along with the federal government anymore. We can nullify acts of Congress. We don't have to sign off on what the federal government says we have to. So we'll go ahead and put all four of these guys up here for this one, and then we'll do some more super chats. So 1832, we got a long way to go, don't we? This might have to become 2 streams. I don't know if we're going to get through all these tonight. So we have in our timeline, Andrew Jackson is is a defeated candidate from previous. He had not won. So we have John Floyd from Virginia, who's a nullifier. It's a very pro states' rights guy. And then you have the anti-Masonic candidate, William Wirt. So let's vote. All right. I think we did. I don't know if we did this one or not. Power Breaker said, we love you in the Philippines. Thank you for that. Waiting to give Teddy his deserved 3rd term. This was earlier, right in Jefferson for he survives. Yeah. Those were among John Adams' last words when he died July 4th, 1826, was Thomas Jefferson survives. Vote for the short king. Sorry, guys, if you're putting these super chats in as they relate to a current vote, I'm a half hour behind on the super chat. So it's going to be old news by the time I get to them. I'm sorry. Everyone historical has contradicted themselves. I agree. Breathing nerddom. You're right about that. Oftentimes you have very strong convictions, but then the situation, the circumstances on the ground, what's going on in the country, sometimes you have to violate your own principles for what you feel is best for the country at that time. The only elections I feel like changing, 1912, 1916. James, I love you. I really appreciate that. You're my kind of guy. All right. How are we doing in this vote? Henry Clay winning big. The anti-Jackson is strong in the chat tonight. I love it. All right, I think we can wrap this one up. William Wirt's going to come in with a strong 7%, which is actually pretty close to what he's historically got. And John Floyd with 3%. Hearts of Iron 4 content. Yeah, we'll see. There's some other stuff on the gaming channel that's doing really well right now. So playing some Master of Command from our friend Griffin, the armchair historian, and that's going really well. So third episode of that just went live today. All right, we're on to 1836. The last election until 1988 that saw the elevation of an incumbent vice president through means other than the president's death or resignation. The first time an incumbent vice president was elected president of the United States. for another 150 years, which is absolutely crazy when you think about it, that it took that long. That just shows you that the vice president was not viewed then the same way that he is now. All right, we're on to Martin Van Buren, our only president whose first language was not English. He grew up speaking Dutch at home. Grew up in that kind of Hudson River Valley of New York, where the Dutch settled in New Netherlands, New Amsterdam, which is what New York was originally called. So this is a continuation of the Jacksonian Democrats. You've got your first Ohioan running for president, William Henry Harrison, who is is he a former senator at this point, or is he a sitting senator? Harrison was a senator from Ohio. He had been U.S. minister to Ground Columbia in South America briefly. Yeah, he was a U.S. senator from Ohio from 25 to 28. So he had briefly been a congressman. He was the governor of Indiana Territory. He was, of course, a general during the War of 1812, secretary of the Northwest Territory, born in Virginia, but is running from the state of Ohio, where he's a former senator at this point. Older president, our oldest president in history to that point. He's the Whig candidate. This is the first time you have the Whigs. But you have a second Whig candidate who is going to split the vote and potentially cost the election for the Whigs, Hugh Lawson White, who is also a Whig, but he's a Southern Whig. So you have a Northern Whig versus a Southern Whig. And you notice that the Southern Whigs running mate is John Tyler. Well, isn't that interesting? Because John Tyler is actually William Henry Harrison's vice president 4 years later, right? So they're going to combine forces. The northern and southern elements of the Whigs are going to join together in that election. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about 1836. States' rights, major issue of the day. This is very much North versus South. You're starting to see that split. Martin Van Buren is the Northern Democrat. He's all about states' rights. He's all about, being opposed to tariffs, being opposed to national bank, things like that. The Whigs are very much more the traditional Federalists of their day. So John Tyler wasn't on the ticket for Harrison. He was on the ticket with White, but he'll be on Harrison's ticket 4 years later. Whigs for infrastructure. Yes, there you go. So if you want central government, doing things, spending money, being involved, that's the Whig party at this time. So let's go ahead and pull up the vote for this one. This will be an interesting one as well. Do you want the Jacksonian Democrat, Van Buren? Do you want the Northern Whig in Harrison, the Ohioan? Or do you want the Southern Whig in White? So we'll go ahead and vote. I'll do some more super chats. Thank you, AMS, for inspiring my love of history, writing a book about my ancestor from the Wars of the Roses. Very cool. I would be very interested in that and what your connection is. Who is your ancestor from the Wars of the Roses? Because I have a few too. John Clifford is one of my prominent Wars of the Roses ancestor. Calvin, thank you for that. Listening from the combine, harvesting corn in Michigan. All the Michigan folks coming out in the chat right now. How do you think a meeting would go between Henry VIII and Donald Trump? Well, Henry VIII, until his later years, was much more kind of athletic and strong and handsome and charismatic, I think, than Donald Trump. That would be interesting. I think Henry VIII would kind of dominate that conversation. Bring back the era of good feelings, American Nerd said. That was from earlier. Time for the United States to finally see Madison's goal of 1812 and annex Canada. Long live Manifest Destiny. Build an NFL team with only presidents. QB is Grant. Well, Grant's kind of short. I think I'd probably more likely go with someone like Lincoln to be the quarterback. Good mind. You know what? Actually, Garfield would be a good quarterback. He's tall, super smart, analytical. I think Garfield would be a good quarterback. All right, how's the vote going on this one? Because I haven't looked. Ooh, yeah, Ohio for the win, baby. The Whigs for the win in this one. Yeah, I was actually showing the. I guess we could have gone with Daniel Webster and Willie Magnum on this one too, or Mangum, but I didn't. I went with the top 3 candidates in that case. Gerald Ford was a college football player. He played for the University of Michigan. I tell you what, you know what? Some folks are asking for Webster. We'll do the vote again. And we'll add the other 2. We can only do 4 though. We can't it only gives me the option for 4. So we'll go with the top 4. So there you go. You got your Daniel Webster this time. So 3 Whigs. Actually, there were 4 Whigs on the ballot, but now everybody's switching their vote from Van Buren to Webster. So Deanne, you're descended from Edward IV and then John Gray, who was Elizabeth Woodville's first husband. Looks like Harrison's still going to win, but now Van Buren gets a distant third. Everybody tried to vote Webster as the compromise candidate. Not going to happen. Webster is the bester. Ride or die for Van Buren. All right. William Henry Harrison still wins it, baby. Ohio for the win. On to 1840. Now, you have in this election, which Van Buren, of course, historically won. Memphis sports fan. I am descended from Hotspur Percy. That's my Clifford connection again. Let's hope Harrison doesn't drink the DC water. Unfortunately, too many did. So William Henry Harrison is running against the incumbent Van Buren historically, but in our timeline, Van Buren's running again against Harrison. And I think we already know how this is going to go because you have John Tyler now as the running mate, which is Tippecanoe and Tyler too is the view on this one. We don't really need to say too much about it because we've got the same candidates going against each other again. So now we have William Henry Harrison versus Martin Van Buren. Look at Harrison dominating this one. I was just scrolling through a little bit of the election results here. You see how Harrison kind of got a national mandate in this one. I mean, this is unusual at this time, where you have North and South. You have the West, as it was then. You have a little bit of everything going for Harrison, and that's the benefit to putting the Southerner, the slave owner, John Tyler, on the ticket. The landslide to end all landslides. William Henry Harrison wins an election that he historically won. This is actually one of our most one-sided votes that we had in this case. So we're on to 1844. We're getting into some really interesting elections now. We're gonna be talking about some of the issues that lead directly to the American Civil War. We've got James Knox Polk, who is from Tennessee. He's very much a Jacksonian Democrat. Like Jackson, he's from Nashville. He's got George Dallas as his running mate, who I believe is from. He was the mayor of Philadelphia, so he's from Pennsylvania. U.S. minister to the U.K. in the lead up to the Civil War. He may be the namesake of Dallas, Texas. But he was also minister to Russia, attorney general of Pennsylvania, U.S. senator from Pennsylvania, Very qualified candidate, George Dallas. Same issues, Democrats, Whigs. Again, strong states' right candidate in Polk. Henry Clay is the great compromiser. Both are Southerners. You have a guy from Tennessee versus a guy from Kentucky. But the Tennesseans got a Pennsylvanian on the ballot with him. And the Whig from Kentucky's got a New Jerseyan on the ballot with him. So they both try to balance their tickets with a Northerner. We're going to go ahead and vote on this one. We'll do some more super chats. So we're on to 1844. This is the lead up. This is Texas is a big question mark. Do we admit Texas to the Union as a slave state? Do we risk war with Mexico? Manifest Destiny is going on during all of this. Polk promises to only serve one term if he's elected. Clay has been on the ballot before. Yeah, Joseph Smith is kind of a slight factor in this one. He's named as a candidate. Polk is all about Manifest Destiny spreading to the West, all of that sort of stuff. All right, a couple super chats while people vote. A vote for Madison is a vote for free trade and sailors' rights. Onward to Ontario. Nice. Federalists technically never officially endorsed DeWitt Clinton in 1812. It was more like a lot of Federalists supported Clinton. Yeah, that makes sense. We must all have Wilson win in 1912 just to see VTH go crazy. Lovely. R. Finch, thank you for becoming a member. Austin says, time to start the Taft propaganda right now. I'm drinking the caramel that's at the bottom of my jar now. Brandon, thank you for that. Watch your video on why Woodrow Wilson is the best president ever. Great video. Now I'm a big fan of him. Can't wait to see him win election on the stream. Oh boy. FDR created the United Nations. He made peace in Europe. He gave us the Marshall Plan almost. He and Woodrow Wilson are the best presidents. I think Aussie has been trying to get rage. He's like been doing rage bait all along in this one. I saw some of his pre-stream chats as well. So, all right, a couple more real quick. Enver, do some reactions to Balkan history out of your usual stuff. Highly recommend Rare Earths 5-part series. Very cool. Interesting. All right, one more. We're about a half hour behind on the chat still. The Peace Kaiser, the innocence of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Levator, I haven't seen that one yet, but I've done obviously some of his other videos. Vote Jackson. He came out to duel JQA. Who do I think was the most qualified candidate to be president, but never managed to win the election? Ooh, that's actually a really good question. And then we'll get back to the voting. The most qualified candidate. Let's see what people think in the chat. Who's the most qualified candidate to never win? I mean, probably Henry Clay, right? I mean, it's got to be Clay. I'm trying to think of who else would be in that conversation besides Clay. Charles Evans Hughes, yeah, maybe. But Clay's who comes to mind for me. Alexander Hamilton, I don't know if he's most qualified. Daniel Webster is a good choice, yeah. Okay. How did this one turn out? I haven't even been looking. Henry Clay wins a narrow victory over James Polk. So the Whigs, honestly, in this timeline, you probably never get a Republican Party, right? Maybe you see the Democratic Party as the party that fades away because they've been getting beat in these elections. So maybe the Whigs hang on and stay unified instead of disintegrating the way that they did historically. We are going to do modern elections, though. I'm thinking this is going to end up being a 2-part stream, and we'll probably stream sometime next week with the second part because we're not getting through the elections as fast as I thought we would. All right, so we're on to 1848. Zachary Taylor is the Whig candidate. Lewis Cass is the Democratic candidate from Michigan. We're not going to get a Michigan president until Gerald Ford in my lifetime. And you got William O. Butler from Kentucky, who is Cass's running mate. You very often are seeing this, right? You see presidential candidates balancing their ticket with somebody from the other part of the country. So Southerners are putting Northerners on the ticket and vice versa. So you've got Zachary Taylor, who is putting Millard Fillmore, who is a Northerner, on the ticket with him. Cass is a Northerner, putting a Southerner on the ticket with him. Van Buren's the only oddball here in that he is from New York, and he puts Charles Francis Adams on the ticket. This is John Quincy Adams' son. So this would be the son and grandson of presidents running. He's probably another good argument for qualified people who never became president. So it's a 3-man race. Same arguments going on, where you have Martin Van Buren now, who has previously been a Democrat, who's breaking away, and you're going to start to see the cracks in the Democrat and Whig parties, where people are going to start going toward the camp that's eventually going to become the Republican Party with the Free Soil, right? The Free Soil, this is opposition to the extension of slavery into the territories. And this is going to be a foundational principle of the Republican Party, is the opposition of extending slavery into the territories, not outright abolition, though there are abolitionists. And you're going to have former Whigs, former Democrats, Free Soilers, who are going to come together to form this party. So I have a feeling we might see an interesting result to this one. So we're going to have Taylor, who's the Southerner, who's the Whig in this case. We have Cass from Michigan, who's the Democrat. And we have the Free Soiler, Van Buren, the former president. Let's go. Vote for Taylor Swift and tariffs. Soil up, bros. I love it. Free soil all the way. I'm not the least bit surprised. I really expected Van Buren to win this election. I would have voted for Van Buren in this one as well. Can we write you in? Well, I wasn't born yet. So from the top of West Virginia, you're not far away from me, Mr. Snowman. I'm only, 40 minutes from the tip of West Virginia. What did I think of Dillon Gabriel? I think he did fine. I think the coaching wasn't great. I think the play calling was not outstanding, but I think Dillon Gabriel is going to do okay. Our defense is fantastic. We have a Super Bowl caliber defense, the Browns. The problem is our offense sucks. We have a good running game. Our offensive line's not great, and our quarterback play and our wide receivers not great. If we could put even an average offense on the field, we could win a Super Bowl with this team because of how good our defense is. But I don't expect to win Sunday, but we'll see what happens. So we're on to 1828, the birth of the Democratic Party. I will be doing more campaign trail videos in the near future. Could be wrong, but didn't Quincy Adams fund an expedition to the Hollow Earth theory? I don't know if he funded one, but I know that was something that was being talked about at that time. Thoughts on Davy Crockett presidency? I don't know. I don't think he was all that great a candidate, personally. Love the videos. As a fellow Christian, I want to know, how did the Southerners justify slavery? That was actually really easy. They pointed to the fact that in the Old Testament, the Israelites had slaves. And while God doesn't explicitly condone and endorse slavery in the Old Testament, he does give regulations for it. And if you are somebody who's looking for a justification for your right to own other human beings, you'll point to that and say, look, God let them have slaves. He must be okay with it. I think that's an oversimplified view, but that's how they justified it. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Martin Van Buren, who didn't get the vote earlier and got his butt kicked on our elections earlier, but now as a Free Soiler gets the election. So, all right, we're on to 1852. I think we'll probably wrap this stream up with the 1864 election. We'll go through that one in this stream tonight. All right, 1852. Franklin Pierce is the Democratic candidate now. He is the pro-slavery New Hampshire candidate for the Democratic Party, and he puts William R. King from North Carolina he'd been a representative from North Carolina, a senator from Alabama on the ticket. They dominate the Whigs in this one. Shadur Sanders is not significantly better. We have a Swiss cheese offensive line, and you throw a rookie out there who already holds on to the ball way too long, and he's going to get killed out there. Shadur Sanders is not the end-all be-all that people seem to think he is. There's a reason he dropped to the 5th round, and there's a reason that he was our 3rd-string quarterback when the season started. Actually, he was the 4th quarterback when the season started. Shadur Sanders is not better than Dillon Gabriel at all. He could be someday, but he's not. He's got to figure out hanging on to the ball too long. He's going to get sacked like crazy if they put him out there. He had no O-line at Colorado, but he was playing in college. He wasn't playing against pros. All right. So you vote in every presidential election. I know we're going to change the title because it's taking way longer. This will be part 1, and we'll change the title when we finish with it. So, all right, here we go. Get off the pot. Vote for Scott. All right. I did the wrong thing. Here we go. Poll. Here we go. 1852. So you've got a Northern pro-slavery candidate versus the Whig Winfield Scott, who's a Virginian, with New Jersey's William Graham. Well, he's listed as, I should say that Winfield Scott is listed from New Jersey, but he's a Virginian. And he's got the governor of North Carolina and secretary of the Navy as his running mate. So it's very interesting. You basically have a pro-slavery Northerner and then 3 Southerners running this time. Fascinating time with this one. Of course, Pierce very famously drinks through his administration, considered widely to be one of the worst presidents in American history. And go. Yeah, I am not surprised that Winfield Scott is destroying Franklin Pierce in this vote. James Buchanan was one of the other Democrats who ran in this election. As you can see here, Stephen Douglas, senator from Illinois, who's going to be prominent later on. Here we have the Whigs. You had Millard Fillmore, who was the sitting president at that time, who ran. He had taken over as president after Zachary Taylor died. Daniel Webster ran for that nomination, didn't get it. Our most one-sided election, going all the way back, our most one-sided contested election, I guess you could say, in this case. So there you have Winfield Scott with 87% of the vote. We are on to 1856. Speaking of bad presidents, now you have the Republican Party has been born. John C. Fremont, who is kind of seen as this Indiana Jones type character, right? He's like an adventurer and an explorer, and very full of himself, unfortunately. And that'll come back to haunt him in the beginning stages of the Civil War. He's a Republican who is from California, all the way out west on the other side of the country. He's going to run against James Buchanan, who's the Democrat from Pennsylvania, from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. John C. Breckinridge, who is a ridiculously young guy. Breckinridge is from Kentucky, and he's born in 1821. So he is just 36 years old when he becomes vice president in this election. Our youngest vice president ever. The only ones who are even close would be Richard Nixon, who was our second youngest vice president, and J.D. Vance, who is our third youngest vice president. So Millard Fillmore from the Know Nothing Party, who is kind of what's left of the Whigs at this point, who haven't become Republicans or folded back into the Democrats, is running. And honestly, if Fillmore hadn't run, Fremont probably wins. And again, the Republicans opposed to the expansion of slavery to new territories. And we'll go ahead and do 1856. We all know how Buchanan turned out, our only unmarried president in history. Only never married, I should say, because we've had presidents who weren't married when they were president, but had been married. All right. Influenza, what a name. I moved to the Netherlands from New York, so I'm required to vote Van Buren. That makes sense. As a teacher currently on strike in Alberta, Canada, I will vote for whomever supports public education the most. All right, cool. So there, Deanne, I read that, or Dean, I read that one earlier. Very cool. Wish my grandma didn't lose her ancestry account long before she passed, but I know I'm descended from John Adams. Interesting. Very cool. Come to Freeport, Illinois. I've been to Freeport, Illinois. It was a long time ago. But yeah, 1858 Lincoln Douglas debates when they were running for the Senate. Reese Ap Thomas is my ancestor. Yeah, I'm familiar with Reese Ap Thomas. All Texans for James Polk. Hey, we're only 15 minutes behind now on this. 54-40 or fight. JK voting Clay. Nice. All right. Let's wrap. Oh my gosh, the Republicans win big. John C. Fremont. Nobody wants those two worst of presidents with Franklin Pierce and Millard Fillmore. So John C. Fremont is going to win with 79% of the vote, which probably means historically that Abraham Lincoln is not the nominee in 1860. Lincoln's only the nominee because he's the compromise candidate. He's everybody's second choice at the Republican convention. Here now we have, it's the Democrats who split, much like the Whigs had been splitting, right? So you have a Southern Democrat in John C. Breckinridge. You have a Northern Democrat in Stephen Douglas. And then you have John Bell, who is the Constitutional Union Party candidate. Bell is not well known and not real highly regarded, but he, as his running mate, is Edward Everett, who is a very qualified candidate himself and is the guy who gave the 2-hour speech before Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address in 1863, was Edward Everett. So I think if there's any election people are pretty familiar with already and we don't need to talk about, it's 1860. So again, Lincoln running on a pro or an anti-spread of slavery candidate. You have Breckinridge, the sitting vice president, running. Both guys are from Kentucky. You have a Tennessean in John Bell. And then you have Stephen Douglas, who is also from Illinois, like Lincoln, and is actually a friend of Lincoln, and had once courted Lincoln's future wife, Mary Todd. Voting against Lincoln is heresy. Weaslow, your super chat was skipped over. Let me go back and see if I missed it. Because I feel like I haven't missed any. But I'll find it. Oh, okay. I'm only related to one U.S. president. My distant cousin is none other than Woodrow Wilson. If you're related to Wilson, I'm related to Wilson's wife through Pocahontas, but you're probably related to other ones too. You just might not know what those connections are, which is, it's pretty. I mean, we certainly don't all know our connections. Do I redeem myself voting Roosevelt in 1912? Yeah, you're going to have to, but we won't get to that today. I bought the John Adams Show on DVD per your recommendation. What should I expect? It's fantastic. It's so good. It's quite accurate, though. You have to remember, anytime you're making a TV show, you have to take creative license with things for the sake of the show. But it's much more accurate than you might think, and it's more accurate than most shows, I would say. All right, Lincoln's going to destroy everyone in this one. John Bell is going to come in second with 6% of the vote, followed by Breckinridge and Douglas. Carlos Ortiz, I have been fantastic. Spencer says, how often do I bring up American history in my sermons? All the time. All the time. Yeah, I bring it up all the time. It's definitely very, very common, probably more so than people would like. Probably the only thing I bring up nearly anywhere close to as often as history is stories about my family. So that was 1860. You say easiest choice ever, but we're on to 1864. And now we're going to get Lincoln versus General George McClellan, with George Pendleton of Ohio as his running mate. So if you've seen the movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, phenomenal, by the way, George Pendleton is one of the prominent characters in that movie. He's the member of Congress who is kind of leading the Democrats' opposition to the 13th Amendment, which would abolish slavery. And Pendleton's grandfather was Nathaniel Pendleton, who was Alexander Hamilton's second in his duel with Aaron Burr. In fact, he's mentioned in the song in Hamilton where he says, Hamilton arrived with his crew, Nathaniel Pendleton, and a doctor that he knew, right? That's George Pendleton's grandfather. So, so Nick Bergman says, suspend habeas corpus, switching to McClellan. I would say two things about that. Number one, suspending habeas corpus is in the Constitution. So what he did was constitutional. Number two, McClellan would have done it too. I guarantee you, if McClellan talked about wanting to be a dictator. He wanted to be a military dictator. He didn't even hide the fact he wanted to be a dictator. So if you think Lincoln was a dictator, McClellan wanted to be more of a dictator. So anyway, 1864. McClellan will just merely fail to win, right? Tricky Nicky says, can we vote for a different vice president? Yeah, I wish we could. That would be, I mean, obviously the thing to do. So, Marstar Miller, thank you for that. This is super fun. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun too. Describing the Browns is how I describe the Rangers in baseball. Best pitching and defense in the league, worst offense. Yeah, I mean, the Guardians are pretty much the same, right? Good pitching, not great offense. Out of context, Chris quote, how did they justify slavery? Oh, that's easy. Yeah, that's fair. Hey, VTH, there's a video I want to recommend. It's called World War II in 39 Minutes by Feltz. Interesting. Very cool. Might have to check that out. Best, worst presidents with regard to respecting the Constitution. Where does Abe rank? Probably somewhere in the middle. I think he interpreted the Constitution in such a way that gave him the best chance to defeat the rebellion, which meant he did some things that probably by his own admission meant really bending the Constitution. But I think most modern presidents have really bent the Constitution. So that's why I put him somewhere in the middle. I would say Calvin Coolidge, George Washington are probably people who would be on the top end of that as far as best presidents. All right, where are we at? 91% for Abraham Lincoln, the strongest one by far. Exhume Monroe, revive the era of good feelings. McClellan was a general. I mean, he didn't have a lot of qualifications beyond that, right? We have 1,100 people in the stream, and I would love to keep it going, but unfortunately, I've got my kids here, and I promised them I would play some Fusion Frenzy with them. So I'm going to be doing that here soon. 2 hours is about all I planned to go tonight. We're going to do more for sure. We're going to come back and do part 2 of this. And my kids won't be with me next week. So I will have more time and we can get through all of the rest of it. All right. So let's go here all right, let's get through the last of the chats. Any book recommendations for a first book on the Civil War? McPherson's Battle Cry of Freedom is a really good place. I'm happy for Baker Mayfield. I'm disappointed he didn't do it in Cleveland. I think he would have been great. Obviously, I think 90% of Browns fans wish we had never traded for Deshaun Watson and we had kept those draft picks, kept Baker Mayfield, and won a Super Bowl with him. I would have loved that for sure. Since you're ending at 64 on the elections of 1788 to 64, which one would I choose to run in and why? 64, and then hopefully I survive and I can put right what Andrew Johnson put desperately wrong. I wish we could vote for a different vice president. That would have made all the difference in the world. All right, guys. I know you want to keep going, and I wish we could, but we're going to wrap it up right there for tonight. I will schedule the next stream sometime in the next couple days, so you'll have a few days advance notice of when it's going to happen. And I'll probably start it a little earlier in the day, so maybe like 5 o'clock Eastern time, since I won't have my kids here and things like that. But thank you guys. Thank you for everyone who did the super chat. Check out the gaming channel. I'm really excited about the series that's going up right there. Check out the all the links down in the description. We've got tours going on. We've still got spots available for our Jordan tour in February and our Hadrian's Wall hike in April. So if you want to book one of those tours, now's the time to do that. Thanks for watching.